afternoon and welcome to ISPIM Thought Leaders session. My name is Agnieszka Radziwon and I'm an Open Innovation Scholar working at Garwood Center for Corporate Innovation and Aarhus University. My guest today is Stephen Rader. Stephen is a Deputy Director for NASA's Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation. He's been working at NASA's Johnson Space Center for the last 30 years. And today, Steve will tell us more about open innovation and crowdsourcing innovation, both at NASA and across federal government. Before I hand over to Steve, let me offer a quick practical reminder. So we have two places which we can use for communication. One of them is a chat. Please use it for private conversations. And we also have Q&A. Don't hesitate to write your questions to Steve in the Q&A section. And also by offering your likes to questions already past that, you can help us in choosing the most interesting questions to be asked just after Steve's presentation. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agnieszka. And thank you, Ian, for inviting me to this. I'm really excited to be here and to be part of this event. Some of my heroes are actually speaking as well, so I've been enjoying the program as well. So I work at NASA, and I work in a small group called Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation, and we work across the entire agency and, in fact, across the entire federal government to help projects across the government start to understand and use open innovation tools. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And I usually start this when I talk to people to talk about space exploration, because we have a lot of challenges at NASA. We are trying to do harder and harder things. There's a reason we don't all live on Mars, right? It's because it's very expensive to get there, very hard to live in space. It's hard to deal with all of these issues. And so this is one of the reasons that our organizations exist, is to try to actually make more progress on these difficult problems. And I'd just like to point out, this is the age of big challenges, right? We're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic challenge. The theme of this conference is these challenges, this new age where we're living at a time where we have big problems to solve. And what I want to propose is open innovation is a key tool in that. Because no matter how much we hear it every day that the world has changed and that technology is just exploding out there, it still doesn't get through to everyone. We are still working as if we're in the past. And what worked in our past is not going to work in this new future. If we look at technology, if we just look at how many scientists there are, 90% of all scientists that have ever lived on the planet are alive today. Think about that. The 10% that lived before, think of all of the innovation that group came up with over thousands of years. And yet, here we are today, and 90% of all scientists that have ever lived are alive. If you look at patents, just a few years ago, we were at about a few 100,000 patents a year. Now we are over 3.5 million patents a year. How many PhDs are coming online? We're finding that China and India and all of the nations around the world have become wealthier. They've put in education institutions, and they are now churning out scientists and engineers that are doing amazing work along with everyone in the world. And there are particular technologies that are actually kind of spurring this new explosion. And these are what I call technology building blocks. They are those inexpensive, easy to access for everyone technologies like machine learning, cheap sensors, additive manufacturing, cheap robotics, autonomous vehicles, open source APIs, blockchain. And the thing about all of these technologies that have been emerging is that they span all of the different industries and disciplines. Everyone uses all of these tools. And so we end up in a situation, if you think about the breadth of domains of the different industries and then the complexity going up, you might look at it and say, okay, in this one little slice is where I live. This is where my organization is, in aerospace or agriculture or medicine. And in that space, what we're seeing is technologies like machine learning are being implemented everywhere. But that also means the innovations and the new developments within machine learning are happening in lots of different places. And more we're finding that the things that happen in other domains can actually be translated back to our domain. So something over in agriculture might be developed, this new machine learning algorithm that actually could help us in aerospace by a factor of 2 or 3. But if we were to see a presentation about that particular technology, we would not recognize it as an opportunity. We would probably think to ourselves, that has nothing to do with us, because we don't understand the context that's being presented. We don't understand the lingo and the language they use. And so we dismiss it. But there are people that actually can understand agriculture and understand aerospace and say, no, with just a few changes, this technology can help you too. And so there's a pro, right? There's a really amazing thing going on here, because there are more latent new technologies that can make significant differences and advances to our world and solve real problems. But the con is that it is almost impossible to find those things. It's either the translation problem or the quantity problem or the geography, but basically you cannot Google search the latest and greatest technology. You cannot easily find those things that can help you. And so we're in this space where the rate of knowledge and technology is increasing at an ever increasing speed. We're finding businesses are finding it hard to find the skills and expertise to actually address all of their needs. And they're just finding it hard to keep up with technology. And NASA is no different. And we find ourselves in the position where the actual risk for us is moving to remaining relevant. Will we remain competitive? Will we remain relevant? And at NASA, we feel that just like the commercial sector, right? We have commercial crew now. We have commercial entities that are working in space. We've got other countries working in this area. And from a public perception standpoint, if those entities all are doing things better than we are, then that's going to really erode our relevancy, right? So we need to actually stay on top of innovation. And in fact, all businesses are dealing with this, because we live in this day that everything is changing. Everybody's seen this at this conference, right? The last 15 years, the most successful companies in the world, over half of them did not make it. If we look at how long companies used to last, in the 50s, it was 60 years, and now it's less than 20. Change is upon us, and it is significant. So I'm going to come back to this diagram, right? What do we as organizations traditionally do? We hire people that know how to do what we do. So if it's NASA, we hire aerospace. We hire people with the skills and domain knowledge to work in our industry. It's just what we do, right? Here's the thing. If all of these innovations out there are actually dispersed across multiple industries and domains, then when we go to try to find innovation and we assign that one individual in our company, that we can train them all day long, but if they will still only be able to access those kinds of things that are within the scope of what they understand, right? But if we put a team on that in our company, we actually get a better result, because teams are always better than individuals at these things, right? And they will be able to access more ideas. But here's the thing, we're missing some of the most rich environments that are outside of our domain. And this is where the crowd is actually amazing at this. And so while a lot of people have seen crowdsourcing as this kind of novelty thing for fundraising or for in public engagement, what we're finding is the crowd, the human network, is an amazing tool for finding those hard to find skills, for finding those ideas that connect the dots between industries. And so we call this open innovation, because open means you're going outside of your normal tools. innovation is what we all have to do. And these platforms that are starting to be developed for crowdsourced innovation are what we're tapping into. We call these curated communities. So we actually work with a bunch of different communities. This is only a sample, I'll show more later, of communities that have been put together to do work, right, and to engage people. And so they have they're two-sided networks. On the crowd-facing side, they've put up a site and put up services and different features that attract users to sign up for free, in most cases, where they sign up on these platforms, and usually it's to learn or to find other people with that same passion, or to learn, connect with jobs or connect with tasks. And on the other side of the network, these companies, these platforms are connecting with businesses that have needs. So TopCoder is a community of 1.5 million software developers and coders and data scientists. So when a company needs software, they can go to TopCoder, and then TopCoder engages that community through a series of tasking and challenges to actually come up with software code. We have those for innovation crowds like Agorize and HeroX, freelance crowds that also do competitions that are up to 44 million people, GrabCAD, which are people that are passionate about doing CAD and mechanical engineering design, 6.5 million of them on one platform. And so the question goes something like this: how do I get expertise, right, out of these? Well, if you look at any population, the expertise curves look like this, right? Where far at the right are the world's experts, that there are only a few, but then there's the general population that has a general knowledge about that topic and that expertise. And then if you're like us, which I think a lot of you are in high-performing organizations, you actually are a right-shifted curve overlaid, right? So we are this large blip that we even have some of the world's experts in our organization. But what I tell our organization is this is misleading, because while we are right-shifted, we are very small. We are only 60,000 total across the entire world doing space development work for NASA. And so the opportunity here, if the expertise is the thing that's going to solve your problem, is in this green wedge to the right of what our spike is, or our main core relevancy. And if I look at these communities, what I see is the curated communities also have a right shift in them. Because let's face it, a person that joins TopCoder to do software development and data science is passionate enough to join a community. And we know that people with passion are the ones that actually move to the right on these curves. But sometimes it's actually not about the actual skill, it's about diversity, right? And finding those. So if I take that curve and I replicate it across lots of domains and turn them kind of looking down on them, I actually might find that my solutions aren't in this expert to the right in my domain, but rather in the middle somewhere in another domain, where there's someone that understands enough about my problem and understands the technology in their area that they can connect the dots. And in fact, this is what we see. There was a study done by MIT of some work done at Incentive, and what they found was they were solving problems for companies at about a rate of about 80% back in 2016. And they looked at all of those successful solutions, and what they found was 70% of the time, the solution came from someone outside of the domain. That meant if it was a chemistry problem, it likely was not going to be a chemist that solved the problem. And then they also found that 75% of the time, the solution already existed. Again, people connecting the dots from other industries. So how do we find them, right? The crowd is millions of people, right? How do we wade through all of that to find the right expert or the right solution? Well, we largely use challenges. Now, I'll say a lot of these platforms are starting to use AI to do some of this as well, and that's fantastic, and we're starting to leverage that. But what we find is if someone's been working a problem for a long time, they already have tried a lot of the solutions in the domain. What they need is something different. And so these companies actually can do a challenge, and a challenge has a magical property to kind of find with a wide net the person that can actually solve the problem. And these companies are really good at formulating the problem statement, which is important, designing the challenge, how many stages, what's the prize amount, how does it go, executing the challenge, dealing with those millions of people around the world that are trying, right? Answering the phone, solution filtering, actually making sure that you as the client don't get 5,000 submissions to look at, but rather the top 50, right? And then they help you with intellectual property and picking the winners. So back to our organization. We work across NASA and across the other federal agencies. We've worked a lot with them. We have the contracts put in place, the processes, and we do education around that. And our public-facing brand is called the NASA Tournament Lab. And for the NASA Tournament Lab, we've actually collaborated with over 80 organizations around the world over the past 10 years, understanding what works in innovation, helping other folks, but a big collaboration is going on out there around this topic. For us, we have assembled a toolkit. I'll talk a minute about our NASA Open Innovation Services contract, which our second iteration started last week. But we actually have an internal crowd community of about 30,000 our employees that we use. We have an external technology search through our OITS contract, which is the YET2. We've actually learned to use micro purchase or credit card purchases of $10,000 or less to actually do work and do challenges. We also have educational programs, as well as a partnership with Harvard and other universities in studying crowd-based research programs. This is a picture of all of the brands of the platforms that we currently have access to through our platform. So we've actually set up to where we can connect with over 40 different platforms representing about 107 million people worldwide. And that's through a whole number of mechanisms. And that work goes anywhere from solving really hard technical problems down to doing graphics and video. So let me just say a few things in the last few minutes. Crowds are great at finding the unique different technologies, right, that get us out of our bubble that we've been stuck in as technical folks. The example I like is potato chips, where a company came in to actually see, can we remove potato chips or remove grease from potato chips easily? The first thing that the company did was change that question to how do you remove a viscous fluid from a delicate wafer? And when they did that, they opened it up to more than just food production engineers. It turned out that the solution was to vibrate the air at a resonant frequency that would cause the grease to come off the chip. And that solution came from a violinist who had seen the rosin fly-off bow and understood the power of resonance. And so that person was also an expert in vibration, but from a very different field. Now, I like to point out mechanical engineers are the ones that are experts in vibration, who are also the ones in food production, and they remained blind to this solution for years. We've seen a similar thing here where we were doing a solar flare prediction algorithm, and we ended up getting a 4 times improvement, not by somebody who was a heliophysicist, but someone who had an undergrad in heliophysics, but had also learned about cell phone signaling and extracting noise out of, or signal out of noise, and applied that mathematics to heliophysics to get us an 8-hour prediction up from a 2-hour prediction capability. Very good results come from crowds cutting across different silos within industries. Subsea 7 was trying to improve their pipeline inspection, and they actually found in the mining industry a solution that was 100 times faster than what they had currently. If they hadn't found this, they said, and another industry had, or another company had, they would be out of business. This is the kind of speed that's working, and crowds are really great at helping to keep that up. We've found this to cross silo effect also internal, where we're actually looking for a way to measure urine volume and microgravity. Ended up there was a solution literally 300 yards away from the person looking for it that saved us a lot of money. I know I only have a couple minutes here, so I'm going to skip some of this, but crowds are really great at lots of shots on goal. Roche Diagnostics, amazing case study in London Business School, where they this European pharmaceutical company was trying to solve hard problems. What they found is in a 60-day study, not only did they solve the problem, they actually replicated all of their research over a 15-year period in 60 days. We did the same kind of work on Space Poop Challenge, on a Hero X Challenge, where we actually received 50,000 submissions and had 20,000 registrants. Got amazing results. Again, a cross-industry solution came out of the medical field where we had laparoscopic surgery coming across. We're just going to finish a couple here because I know we're out of time here. But what we are seeing is just amazing solutions at every turn. In algorithms, we're seeing big leaps in, we've done that in Asteroid Data Hunter. We've had lots of experience with this, over 430 different challenges and projects, most of which are successful, have cost savings. And we're seeing a big shift in the future of work where not only crowdsourcing is coming of age, but also the gig economy. And in fact, there are predictions that within the next few years, there will be more gig workers than actual core workers in the workforce. And those people are members of this crowd and this crowd model. And we're trying to figure out, how do we adjust to this new world? So this is my get off the stage chart. Open is the future and innovation is no longer optional. These crowds in the gig, they have increased capabilities. They're able to access the expertise and skills to actually get us what we need. And if we don't do this as businesses and organizations, we won't be here very much longer. So we have to learn to use these new tools. The pandemic, if you look at how the crowd responded when the pandemic hit, they came up with some amazing results in days. And there are over 200 open innovation initiatives launched within the first couple of weeks. You can see them here on this link. And with that, I'll end my talk and open it up for questions.
Steve, thanks a lot for an excellent presentation. There are a couple of questions here already, and then I just wanted to remind everyone that's with us right now that if you didn't have a chance to write your question, please feel free to do so and use a Q&A for this function. At the moment, we have about 90 people in the room, so please don't wait for too long because we only have 8 minutes for all the questions. All right, the first question I see, this is a question of Petri Villan. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. How do you define, prioritize, and select the challenges you are solving with the crowds? Very good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And different innovation programs we find handle this differently. Some will do a top-down, try to select and try to actually prioritize. We actually have found that the bottom-up approach is much, much more effective. And that is by working with the projects that actually have need and actually have the problems that need to be solved. We work with them to understand that this is a tool they need to use, and we really put it back on them. They have to use their own budget. They have to come, and we simply facilitate using the tool. So there's really it's not like we've got one pot of money that we're doling out projects for. We make them come and use the project. Now, sometimes we'll do matching or we'll have ways to kind of incentivize them to try these projects for the first time. But our goal is to make this a tool that they use just as a normal course of practice. And in fact, that has shown to be a slow process to get everyone to buy in, but it is a snowball effect. We get more and more people coming back to us and running more challenges, and it's becoming much more prolific. We currently have we normally work about 30 challenges at any one time during the life cycle. We're currently working over 100 challenges. So wow. It's really growing in terms of finding its effectiveness.
All right. ISPIM is typically sort of very welcoming for a variety of audience, lots of diversity. So we also have many people that work for small businesses. So I see a question that I think is very much directed to this community. So Jara Pascal is asking, how can we apply this methodology? I understand crowdsourcing innovation to small businesses.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jara. Thank you. So it's interesting because I think that the open innovation and open talent models are the most powerful for small businesses, because there are a lot of these services that are much less expensive than traditional, especially say you need data science and you need to develop a new machine learning algorithm and you're a small business. That's a really hard thing to stand up a whole data science department, right? But you can go off to Topcoder or Kaggle or even some of the smaller groups like Driven Data and others and run a challenge to get that. Or you can go to TopTal or to Freelancer and basically find an expert that you can bring on to help you. And doing that without having to hire someone when you can't afford it, right? So what we're seeing in the gig economy and with these open innovation platforms is this is the time where you can easily and affordably find something that's within your budget and really kind of, we talk about it as almost operate as superpower. Even a single individual employee, if you know how to use these tools, you can use freelancers to actually help you do videos and make your better presentation and do analysis and do code. And we're actually finding businesses that enable their employees to actually go freelance part of their work. They actually are multiplying the amount of work they're doing and often at a lot less cost. There's some great examples that Paul Estes did at Microsoft, where he found a year-over-year savings of 75% in his department when he took that strategy on. Yeah, no, it's significant. He has a great story there.
So I hear that you're trying to tell us that it's not as expensive as people may think it is. So it's just a choice of an appropriate tool, potentially being a freelancer, when one could also tap into some competencies there.
Yeah, it's hard to get into all of the aspects, but at the end, I touched on how this fits in with the gig economy and the changes to the future of work. And what we're finding is there's an overlap. Sometimes a challenge is the way you want to go, and sometimes you simply want to reach out to a different freelancer and find them using machine learning. And that's how I think this world has to transition. Change is too fast, right? Our traditional company model was to capture people, right? I'm going to recruit all these people and I'm going to capture them and I'm going to own them. And what we're finding is in this day and age when things are changing so fast, you can't hire all the people you need, because if you're going to hire the people with the latest and greatest, you've got to lay people off, and that model doesn't work. And so this new, more agile way of bringing in people on the freelance, those freelancers often bring in the latest and greatest technologies and help our own employee base to stay up with things. So it's a really interesting dynamic going on right now, and a lot of exciting work going on.
I think you just partly answered to Gary's question that I didn't manage to ask you, who was asking about the differences between open versus traditional economy. But I see that one of the questions that's also very, very high, and I think this is a very good question, probably concern of many of us. It's a question of Michael Levis. How do you ensure that sensitive information gets protected if shared with the crowd?
Yeah, it's funny because companies are actually really good at this, the platforms that run these, because that's the first question every company asks. So let's go back to the potato chip example. Think about that for a second. One of the things they did was reword the problem such that it was, how do I remove a viscous fluid from a delicate wafer? When I posted that challenge, when they posted that challenge, it was no longer known that that was a potato chip manufacturing problem. They're able to change the questions so that you don't actually know what you're working on. There's a great example where there was a challenge that was to track an individual bison in Yellowstone National Park using only social media uploads. That was put on Topcoder. They came up with a solution. The solution worked great. The real problem was, how does the CIA actually track Russians in Crimea? And that was the algorithm. So there's a lot of kind of things you can do there. There are also crowds that will have very well vetted crowd members where you can get NDAs signed, you can get security clearances, whatever you need. That is a very robust economy in terms of how they've figured out how to address that concern for companies.
All right, we have 1 minute left. So let me ask the final question, which is probably going to wrap up our discussion with for the future outlook. Is AI and machine learning going to replace crowdsourcing in the nearest future?
Yeah, what we're seeing actually is it's a very symbiotic relationship. I would say this, automation, AI, robotics, they are actually coming for everyone's jobs, right? And I would say they've been doing that for hundreds of years. The only difference is now we are moving at such a rate that our traditional model for learning and upskilling is breaking. And so we're not able to transition our workforce fast enough. If you think about it, universities are putting out cutting edge stuff in their graduate work, but their undergraduates aren't being trained on any of that kind of cutting edge stuff for like 10 years after it comes out. That's the broken model, right? And this is where freelancing and the gig economy is showing us that those people are actually upskilling and learning all the time. And in the traditional model, when employees work for a company, they were not allowed to, right? They got, I think the average is $1,000 per year per employee for training. And that's mostly compliance training. And so the traditional model can't keep up. But this new gig model, this new crowd model actually starts to tap into passion. It starts to tap into matching people with global work, and it allows for training. I talked to one lead, kind of heavy hitting young freelancer at Top Coder, and I asked him on a panel, I said, how much of your time do you spend learning? And he really floored me. He said 60% of his time he was learning new things. That's the difference between what's going to take to work with automation and what we did for hundreds of years, right? And it's that kind of mindset, because if you look at the efficiencies in the workplace, our traditional model, the average efficiency of our workforce is 37%. So we're already not getting about 60% effectiveness there, but we're keeping them captive and not letting them use that extra time to learn. And so this new kind of model kind of starts to address that.
All right. Stephen, thanks a lot. I think there's just an entire list of takeaways from your talk, and it's really an excellent talk with lots of great points and inspiration. And then I think that by now everyone is convinced that the smartest people do not necessarily work for us. They might be located in many different places. Yeah. And it's just so important to just focus on this constant development and constant learning to be able to keep up with new things coming up. Thanks a lot, Stephen, and thanks a lot to our great audience and great questions. So I wish you all a great ISPIM. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.